Now it's with special excitement that I'm pleased to welcome Prof. Gary Vilk to our course. It's with a great honor that we have him with us today. Prof. Vilk is a professor of emergency medicine at the University of San Diego School of Medicine. He served as the vice chair of a clinical operation for emergency medicine and oversees 3 emergency departments and 2 urgent cares, as well as serve as a medical director for risk management for UCSD Health. He has over 300 peer-reviewed publications and has written 2 textbooks and over 80 textbook chapters. Prof. Vilk was my mentor during my fellowship, and he made a huge impact upon me and many fellows as well. I left feeling like my career had changed for the better. After you have general idea and insight about the clinical research with Dr. Al-Shahrani, let's deep dive with Prof. Vilk into how to choose your mentor. Please join me in welcoming Prof. Vilk.
Thank you very much. And am I able to screen share? All right. And does the sound check, everybody hearing me and seeing my slides okay? I hope so. If not, let me know. For me, it's good morning, good evening to you all there. The wonders of Zoom have made this opportunity possible here, and I appreciate the very warm and kind introduction, and I'm very pleased and honored to be able to speak with you this morning or for this afternoon. I'm going to speak for the next 40 some minutes or so on the topic of mentorship, choosing a mentor, what a mentor does, and hopefully at the end here we'll have some insight into career opportunities for all here. Whenever I give a talk, I talk about disclosures. I don't have any corporate or funding investments that I need to discuss. I have been funded by our government's National Institute of Health, the National Institute of Justice, and the Institute for the Prevention of In-Custody Deaths. I'm also a paid legal consultant. I think it's already been mentioned probably earlier in the first talk, but use the Q&A instead of chat, and then we'll address the questions as we get further along there. I'll be happy to answer them at the end. I believe we have about 10 or 15 minutes. So goals for this talk. Sort of define what is a mentor. Truly, what do they do? What should they do? Why is having a mentor important? There's people go through all careers with truly trying to do it on their own, but I think a mentorship is a very, very special relationship that creates a lot of opportunity for both ends. What would be the quality of a good mentor? What should a person be looking for if seeking out a mentor? If one wants to be a mentor, what kind of quality should they have? And how to find and choose a research mentor. You usually just don't go and shop for one. You have to actually seek it out or get advisement for it. And we'll talk a little bit about that process and how that can happen. Barriers. So not all mentor-mentee relationships work as well as they probably should. And we'll talk about some of these barriers as well. So how to find out if the relationship is not working, what may or may not be able to be done to correct that, or to identify it and move on to another mentor. And finally, I'm going to talk about why one would want to be considered doing mentorship, why you would want to be a mentor as their career develops. So what is a mentor? If you look up the dictionary, it's relatively straightforward. An experienced and trusted advisor, basically somebody who is there for you and supports you and advises you. And as a verb, it's really to train or advise. Typically, it's a younger colleague. Doesn't always have to be. It may be somebody who has more experience in a certain field or area. But the idea really is there's a relationship of advocating and supporting. So mentors do many different things. They have different hats. They have different roles. One of them is often teacher, educating their mentees or working with them and sharing their wisdom. Some of them are some roles, including being a coach, the cheerleader, the giving the pep talks, getting them out there and doing their research, helping them when things aren't going as well, when the paper doesn't get accepted or the grant doesn't get picked up. Sort of coaching them, giving them that positive attitude, being an advocate. Sometimes a mentor needs to step up and help support their mentee, helps go to bat for them, try to help overcome obstacles that the mentee is having challenges with. Oftentimes, their hat the wearer is a sponsorship, helping support them. A mentor ideally would be a career role model, somebody that their career is something that you appreciate, that may not be the exact same path, but the idea is that somebody that you can look forward to the future and have an idea of where you want to be in 5 or 10 or 15 years. A mentor is an assistant with their personal development. Research is important. The academics are important, but if the personal development is not going as well, the research and the academic productivity will suffer. And this is more and more a concept that I think people have embraced, the idea of a healthy work-life balance. We all want to work hard. We all want to do well in our academic careers, but that has to be balanced with the home life, with the family, with things that you want to do outside of work. And so that balance is important. What is important about having a mentor? There are programs, and so there's the one-on-one relationship, me having a mentorship relationship with another individual, and then there are actual programs where the whole department has created a mentorship program to help with things. When you develop these types of programs, and each junior faculty member or junior researcher has a mentorship program set up, it is known to show increases in research productivity. Papers are produced, grants are obtained. It just builds that relationship and creates more of an academic machinery that helps a department grow. The programs will help with faculty retention. We were having some of our departments at our hospital were having trouble keeping junior faculty. They come in, they try to do research, they get frustrated with the Human Subjects Committee, the fact that journals don't want to accept their papers, they don't have support. The idea of creating a mentorship program often helps create more of a guidance for these faculty members and makes the process not necessarily any easier, but more understandable, more tolerable, and it keeps the faculty there. They don't seek employment somewhere else, which is what our goal is. Academic promotion. As part of going through the academic ladder from assistant to associate to full professor, there are steps and hurdles that have to be done. And a mentor will often help guide the junior faculty member into working with what is important, how to get grants. That's going to help your academic promotion. What lectures to give, what not to give, what will be good use of your limited amount of time. And that is something a mentor can do to help really optimize the productivity, both academic, clinical, and emotional of a faculty member. And when all that works well, you get career satisfaction. You look forward to your job. You look forward to the research. You look forward to going to the lab or to writing a paper. This all is what we want to do. You want to look forward to the happiness that you're getting from the products you're doing. Qualities of a mentor. They need to be available and they need to be engaged. Not every person can be a mentor. They don't have the time, they don't have the enjoyment, they don't have the engagement. They have to be there for the mentee. They have to be a good listener. You can give and talk to somebody all the time, but if you're not listening to what they need, then you're not going to be effective. It's sort of like taking care of patients. We have to listen to our patients at times to get a history versus looking for studies and exams. The listening gives you more often than the talking. You have to be flexible. You have to adapt to the mentee's individual needs. Everybody's a little different. Everybody learns differently, thinks differently. Some people are visual, some people are task-oriented, some people need deadlines. You have to learn what your mentee needs, and you have to really work with that to try to help optimize your relationship. Mentors should be respected by peers in leadership. It should be somebody with having some credibility at some level, and it may be in clinical work, it may be in research productivity, it may be in leadership. They may have a position of leadership within their department. A mentor needs to be humble and self-reflective. I've had a number of mentors in my career, and I think the most times I get something out of that is when they tell me stories of their own careers. When I was in a position of having challenges or things aren't going well, they can come back and say, yeah, I've been there too. When I was, back in my junior days, this happened to me. There's a lot of bonding that goes on when you realize that you're not the only one having the research challenges, the academic challenges, and that self-reflective sharing of information can be very, very beneficial in the relationship. A mentor needs to be empathetic to the personal and professional needs, as well as cultural background. If a person has, twins and they're very busy and their spouse is also a professional and there's a lot of home challenges, a mentor needs to understand that they need to be sensitive to that and try to help work with that. You can't pretend it doesn't exist because it's there and it affects productivity and it affects the academic mission. A mentor needs to be a sincere, committed, and desired mentor. If you don't want to do the job, you shouldn't do it, just like anything. But you really should want to be that mentor if you're going to be in the role of mentoring somebody else. A mentor's got to be able to give positive as well as negative feedback, right? The positive just enforces and lifts them up. It's supportive. Negative feedback doesn't have to be negative in the sense that you're doing a bad job or this is a failure. It's really challenging, setting the bar, setting goals, telling them, I like what you're doing, but I think you can get it to this level here. Or I think this work needs to be a little bit more emphasized there, and really challenge them to get to the next level. Make it a positive impact, even though it may be negative feedback. And then there's the meetings. There will need to be formal meetings, but beyond that, the mentor needs to be mindful that the mentee still has interactions and trying to support them. Successful mentors will often find common goals or backgrounds with the mentee, and it doesn't have to be academic. One of my first mentors liked to play tennis and would take me out to play tennis with them, and the sportsmanship, the idea of challenging, and then afterwards we chat for 10, 15, 20 minutes, an informal mentor-mentee relationship during those meetings, but we had something in common. And again, it doesn't have to be academic. A mentor serves as a role model. Again, the idea of not having something that the mentee can sort of look towards and say, I like those qualities of my mentor. I hope to attain those. They don't have to like everything. They don't have to want to be the same role, but the idea of the modeling is positive. They find benefit with the relationship with the mentee. A mentor who is doing this because they're told to do it, because the chair says, hey, I need you to mentor, Dr. So-and-so over there. If their heart's not into it, it won't benefit. But if they do look for that mentorship relationship, they will find this benefit. It takes time. It's not a zero-sum game. You have to invest, but the relationship is well worth it in the end if you're really going with a positive attitude. A mentor wants to solve problems collaboratively, not tell the mentee what to do, go do this, go do that, but really walk through the problems. Give the mentee the chance to do some thinking that's sort of independent, that is critical, and the ability to try to problem solve, because that's the skill set the mentee will need to have down the road. Career coaching, trying to guide people. Some people want to do too much. They want to research on everything, and they may need to be guided back into a little bit more of a narrow focus or slow down. Others may need a little pushing. Hey, let's what are you interested in? Let's go do a case report. Let's do a review of literature. Let's do some retrospective research and then build upon that and try to grow it into grants and funding. So it depends on what level the mentees are in. Celebrating the mentee's accomplishments. This should be obvious. If I have a mentee relationship, my mentee gets a paper published, I'm the first one trying to find it, send it them, and give them the positive feedback, the congratulations. Not everybody does this. You want to celebrate the accomplishments. I think that's part of our goal, and we should embrace that as a mentor, that our mentee was successful. The true success of a mentor is really the accomplishments of their mentee on their own. And a mentor should reflect on how their own cultural background and personal history influences the mentoring relationships. What I've done in my background when I mentor somebody, both positive and negative, things I've learned from. I share a lot of my challenging stories with my mentees because I think it's good for them to hear that, I feel I've had a successful career, but it wasn't always easy. There are challenges, and that you can overcome these challenges and get to where you want to go. A mentee. So besides having mentors and their expectations, a mentee needs certain qualities. A mentee needs to be motivated, right? If they're not motivated, it doesn't matter how wonderful your mentor is, how exciting, coaching, supportive they are, a mentee is not going to succeed. A mentee needs to be curious and creative, right? This is not I'm going to go in with this mind frame and this is all I'm going to do. You want to go in with an open mind. You want to go in and think of your career as a palette, as opportunities, not just I want to do one thing and have one thing only. That will really limit somebody. A mentee needs to be a good listener. They have to hear what's being said to them. Otherwise, again, the words will be wasted. The mentee needs to be responsible and responsive. If goals are set, timelines are created, meetings are being developed, the mentee needs to be responsible and participate and work towards that. Guidelines are set to really develop the mentee into the role they want to be. So they need to be participant in that. They need to be able to work independently, right? A mentee needs to work by themselves. They can't always be relying on the mentor to push them or support them, but they need to be driving that. But also they have to work as a team, right? Research is not typically an independent person game. Sure, you can write a paper yourself or do some research yourself, but a successful research is going to be collaborative. They're going to be working with other individuals in their field, other colleagues. They'll work with students and fellows to try to be productive as well. The mentee needs to be resilient and open to multiple outcomes. They have to accept that things don't always go the way they desire, and be able to bounce back, be able to adjust the course a little bit. Again, humble and self-reflective. They have to appreciate that somebody is taking the time to give them commentary, both positive and critical changes, and they need to appreciate that. They need to receive feedback effectively and graciously. It's not easy for a mentor to give negative feedback, to give the mentee some suggestions that they're not maybe getting things going as quickly as they should, or not writing as well as they could, put more effort into this area, here's some opportunities. To give negative feedback like that is difficult. And the mentee needs to appreciate that somebody's taken the time to be critical of them and try to improve them. It's not destructive commentary, it's really trying to improve. It's an area of opportunity, and the mentee needs to appreciate that and accept it. They need to take an active role in their own learning and professional development. This is not a passive game. You have to step in, you have to do the work. You're going to put some time in on your own hours. That's the idea of research. It's not always funded. It's not always given an hourly wage. A lot of it you're doing on your own. They have to engage in the problem solving with their mentor. The mentor can't just, again, tell them, this is what you need to do. They need to work with that mentor to figure out how to overcome the challenges that sometimes occur. And they need to actively assess and communicate their needs. As a mentor, I will be asking and trying to do probing questions. You know, how are things going? How are you doing? How's the family doing? I will be engaged at that level, trying to seek out if there are challenges that my mentee may be having. But if the mentee doesn't communicate these or keeps them inside, I'll never know. And so I can't be as effective in trying to help them if I don't know what their changing needs are. And a mentee shouldn't have only one mentor. I think I mentioned earlier, I've had a number of mentors in my career, and it varies. And I still have mentors that I go to, even being a full professor and very senior in my department. I think the idea of having somebody to talk to get guidance, to bounce things off of is important. And one's career should probably have multiple mentors, and it varies. Sometimes there'll be life mentors, there'll be research mentors. Maybe your research goes into a very specific area, and the original mentor that got you going in research and got you grant funded is wonderful, but you may need a more specialized mentor and who knows that space and maybe outside your own university. And that's okay. That's the expectation, is to grow and find new mentors. And a mentee needs to reflect on how their own cultural background and personal history influences their relationship with the mentor. It has to be self-reflective. A slide on a successful researcher. There are lots of qualities. A researcher needs to devise and conduct experiments. We know that they have to have that ability to do so. They have to work as a team. Teamwork skills are important to be a successful researcher. They have to answer questions and create these abilities to question the intricate complexities. What are the details of trying to put a project together? What are the challenges? What are the hurdles? They have to have strong written and oral skills, and they have to have patience and dedication. I put this slide on here just to talk about researchers and how the skill set for researchers, some overlap with being a mentee. You know, you have to have patience, dedication, you have to be able to communicate, you have to be able to walk through things, you have to have teamwork. So the qualities that make a good, successful researcher are the same qualities that the individual will need to be either a mentee earlier in their career or a mentor later in their career. These are the types of things that will follow one's academic career throughout. How to find a mentor. So that's a great question. Where do you go? They don't grow on trees. You have to actually seek them out. Sometimes it's just local expertise. Maybe your department, you're doing a research project, and it may be simple as a small case series. You want to write a case report. You want to do some local review of records to try to create a study. You know, if that may be any of your professors that do research in that venue. My original research focus was EMS, emergency medical services. And so what do the paramedics and ambulance providers do for care? And so one of my mentors early on was an EMS medical director for one of our cities. And so I worked with and collaborated with him to learn about the space and do research in that. So there may be just local expertise. You may need to talk to your department chair. Your chair should have experience, should have knowledge of others in the space. So they may know other chairs of different departments. Our academic chair is part of a chair committee. And so they meet with other chairs of in emergency medicine nationally and locally. And so they may have some natural knowledge of other people doing research on that specific topic that you could use as a mentor. So that can often be a source for finding a mentor. Collaborations with other services. So just because I'm an emergency physician doesn't mean all my mentors have to be emergency doctors. We have a number of our faculty who are of interest in other areas. So one of our faculties is interested in acute stroke care in the emergency department. Well, the natural linkage would be with neurology and our neurostroke services. And he has been very successful in getting National Institute of Health grant funding, collaborating with the successful mentors in the neuro world. They've had some good funded people there, and he has collaborated and utilized their experience to be able to put together good grant applications. To be able to put a big grant together over time, you do have to have mentors in that space. They have to be funded themselves in order to help you get funding. So that mentorship relationship, as you build up over the career to try to get more funding through national systems or through corporate systems, you have to have a track record, and often the collaboration builds that track record almost immediately. We were putting together a study looking at cardiac arrest in the field, and we collaborated with our cardiology service, our stroke service, and our EMS service to put together a very competitive grant. So without having done a lot of research in that area, we were able to immediately create a environment of timing. We've done lots of research. When you pull all our articles together, all our grant funds together with all these services, you immediately have that credibility. And that's another way of developing a mentorship relationship. And for us, seeking out, you can even go to the NIH website or other places. This is just a snapshot of one of, if you search NIH and mentor, National Institute of Health and mentor, there's training. There is actually video on how to find an NIH mentor. They'll walk you through what is a successful mentor, what isn't. So every level of research, of funding, of trying to develop your career, you need to have mentors that are in that space, that work in that area. So if I want to get NIH funding, when I wanted to do that, I needed to work with mentors that had previous NIH funding. And that was what I built my funding off of. I couldn't go in there with a mentor that didn't have that success because I needed that track record. That's what the NIH wants. So each grant area that you're looking for will have different expectations. The thoughts on choosing a mentor, this gives you a little bit more of the background of what you want to do, what you want to think about. Sort of what we're talking about in this lecture here is, what do you want to consider when you're looking for your mentor? So there are resources out there. And with the internet and with Google, lots of ways of finding different things to sort of learn from. Establishing a mentoring program. So we're talking about mentorship, a mentor-mentee relationship. But I think departments need to consider this if they don't have it already. And many haven't. Many have relied on the informal relationship that the junior faculty will find somebody to work with as a mentor. But the reality, as we talked about earlier, to establish and build that sense of bonding, you need to have a program. You need to help formalize. It has to be supported by the department chair, the School of Medicine, whoever leadership is in your area. They need to support this. And this is actually the title page from our current faculty mentoring toolkit. It actually gives us educational components on how to be a mentor. Pairing mentors and mentees. That's the first step, right? You've got to find the right relationship. Wine tasting and pairings, very different. It works out. Mentors and mentees, there has to be some thought put behind it. Whoever is coordinating the program, whether it's the chair, whether it is a mentor director, has to think about the individual relationships, the gender issues, the research focuses, the availabilities. And so all those need to be done to get the right pairing of a mentor and mentee to increase your program successfulness. When you become a mentor, when somebody says, can you be my mentor, or you're assigned being a mentor because you want to do it, there's things you're going to want to do when you meet your mentee for the first time. Obviously, you want to get to know each other. And sure, I know my faculty colleagues. I see them at work, we hand off things, but really, this is a relationship. This is really getting to know them, sharing information about your professional and personal life, including promotion, getting to know them at a individual level as well as a professional level. I think it's important to learn something new about your mentee or mentor. That my mentee likes to do rock climbing and do hiking out in the deserts. Interesting. All right, I like that. You're adventurous. You like to try new things. It gives you some insight into what they like to do in their career. Others, I like to go and surf and find new restaurants. Well, there may be a relationship we can bond there with. So it depends on some of these personal aspects that gets that creative bonding. Like I said, one of my first mentors used to take me to play tennis, and he loved tennis and I loved tennis. We had a great time doing that, and it was a great bonding opportunity, as well as a time for regular mentoring. It didn't have to be formal meetings at those points. You want to specify off-limit topics. There may be something the mentor and mentees don't want to talk about. You want to discuss that level of confidentiality. We like to think that always our relationships are going to be good and solid, but sometimes there are things that people just don't feel comfortable talking about, maybe at the first meeting, but maybe over time as they get to know you, you will be that confidant. You will be the person that they can say, I'm having problems with this person. I'm having difficulties at home. They can talk about that. I've mentored people through relationships, breakups with boyfriends and girlfriends or spouses challenges. Often those types of mentoring, even though it's not academic, it's not research based, it improves all that productivity, because the things that distract them that are there, if they get help, and it may not be me coaching them, but it may be saying, let's get you to some therapy, let's get you to a counselor, let's get you some opportunities here based on experience, and that will help improve their productivity. You want to share individual goals. Where do you want to be? This is an early meeting. What do you want to get out of this relationship? What do I want to get as a mentor? What do you want to get as a mentee? And again, discussing the level of confidentiality. There'll be logistics that have to be set for the first meeting. When and where will we meet? Do we meet at the office? Do we meet at the conference center? Do we meet at a restaurant? Do we meet on the tennis courts? There should be formal meetings, but there also can be informal meetings. But they need to be set up as such. How often are we going to meet? And it depends. If we're putting a grant together, if we're actually doing a formal research project and trying to roll things, the meetings may be more frequent. They could be Zoom, they could be in person, they could be online, but we should discuss how often we want to meet for either specific projects or just mentoring and growth development in general. When I have research fellows, I try to meet on a regular basis and set things up. I tend to be more informal. I want to meet and talk with things, but I like to get lunch and have it over an informal personal meeting that we can do both productive at work, but also make sure that relationship and the well-being, the mental well-being of my mentee is going along. How do you schedule meetings? How many times have you said, hey, we should get together? And next thing you know, 2 months have passed by and we haven't gotten together because neither put it on the calendar. They didn't schedule something. Over my time, I've realized the comment, we should get together, should be followed up by, I'm sending you an email with some dates. Let's book it in our calendar and make it work. Because so many times the let's get together and let's meet ends up being weeks and weeks and weeks and nothing happens just because everybody is very busy. How does the mentor-mentee communicate between meetings? This should be discussed. Sometimes it's texting, sometimes it's emails, sometimes it's phone calls. It depends, or sometimes you just set up some informal times. But the communication is going to be huge. That's what's important for the mentor-mentee relationship. What agenda format will we use? Is there going to be a formal agenda? We're going to walk through all the projects, we're going to walk through our relationship, and that may be different at different times. And I'll cover this a little bit more detail in just a moment. Are there going to be fixed agenda items? Are we going to talk about it each time? And again, are we going to have a formal agenda, and who's going to set that? So will the mentee put together the agenda so that they have it set up for the mentor, or the mentor put it together to drive the meetings? It depends on the needs and the experience and the relationship at that time. And how will feedback be exchanged in the meetings? How are we going to talk about it? And outside the meetings? Again, both positive feedback, right? Celebrate the positive things, and the areas of improvement or opportunity. What is the measure of success? How do we know this relationship is working, this mentor-mentee practice? It may be based on getting a grant, if that's the basis of that relationship. It may be the academic advancement, going from assistant to associate professor. It may be getting a number of publications. So that what we want to measure success will be dependent on the relationship and the goals of that relationship. As part of the first meeting, we have a partnership agreement. This is a relationship. We want to practice active listening, not always interrupting, not always saying, oh yeah, I get what you're saying. Let the person speak through and share their feelings. Sometimes you get more out of it by listening a little bit longer. You want to review and assess the goals for the relationship. Again, this is an agreement we have. Provide a space that's supportive and safe for discussions. If there's a person having challenges with their chair, with other colleagues, maybe meeting at the office is not the best place because they fear that somebody may overhear them. So a meeting off-site might be a benefit. So it depends on what is going on with that mentee, that where you meet might actually have an impact on the ability to communicate. You want to commit to being available for regular meetings and reviewing relevant documents, going over the papers, going over the research, going over the grants applications, going over the letters of recommendation for that grant. You might be needing a bigger space. Sometimes a room with a table, you can put things out and sort of walk through it. It depends on where you're at. And finally, with the first meeting, you want to confirm your next steps, right? This is not the end, this is the beginning. And so you want to schedule a date and a time and a place for future meetings. And as I said earlier, oftentimes you say, well, let's get this together and set up a meeting. Unless it happens, often it doesn't get done. So sometimes just pulling out the calendar at that time and saying, great, let's meet in 1 month, let's meet in 2 months, let's meet in 2 weeks, whatever that is, putting a spot in the calendar and locking it in at that time guarantees that meeting to occur. You want to set goals. What are we going to get done by our next meeting? Meetings don't do anything unless you really have a purpose for them. You want to touch base on how the grant is going. You want to look and see how the paper is coming along. Who's responsible for rescheduling if necessary? Meaning if the meeting has to be canceled for some reason, you want to make sure it's rescheduled and we don't forget about it. A mentor and a mentee should focus on certain areas of academic development. Again, there's the research relationship, the research mentor, and that's part of what we're talking about. But really, you want the person to be a mentor in the full circle of academic development. And that includes education, the excellence in education, the research and creative activity. You want them to be a researcher, a leader, an innovative person. Clinical care, unless you're going to go completely grant funded and not do any clinical work, you still have to be a great clinician, right? You still have to be, I work my shifts, I worked last night. So as far as that goes, that's part of my career, and the clinical care is part of that. We don't want to forget about that. Community engagement, working with the community, whether it's the academic community, whether it's the research community, whether it is with specific groups in your area. Giving a talk like this is engagement. I love to speak to people. I love the opportunity. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I've had the fortunate career development to be able to spend with you. Service. Part of what we do is service, right? We're taking care of individuals. We are giving back to committees. We are trying to improve our university setting. And self-development. The individual themselves has to grow. If the individual doesn't grow, then there'll be no success. You have to have work-life balance. You have to have support. You have to have mentors. I like this table because I think it's a good benchmark for the mentor relationship. We in our system have an every 6-month formal meeting with our mentees. So I have several faculty members that are my mentees. They've been coordinated by a mentor director. And we have certain characteristics or research commonalities, EMS. We have certain things that sort of balance that. And so we have a formality that every 6 months we have our meeting, we actually go through some questions with the mentor. And this is one of them, or the mentee. They pick out what their current percentage of duties and hours per week are spent teaching and research and clinical care, community engagement and administration service, meaning do they do a administrative role? Are they the director of the student program, or do they the director of another service? And then self-development. They put down how many hours per week they're working. They put down the number or the percent of these duties. And then they fill out a second graph saying, okay, that's what my current level is. Where do I want to be? What do I think is optimal for me? What is my goal? And boy, ideally, they'd overlap, right? Everybody's doing 20 hours of clinical care and 15 hours of research and 3 hours of teaching every week. And that's what they want to be. And that optimal matches their current. It's not often the case. And so then the mentor is trying to work with the mentee. How can we get you from where you want to be to where you are to where you want to be? How can we get to that point? And it's not going to be overnight. This is a career development. This is, well, if you want to do less clinical care and still be funded, you need to get you some grants so that you can buy down some of your clinical shifts and focus more on your research. So sometimes there is that component of trying to mentor them that way. There are lots of communication tools and styles. These are just a couple examples of things that can be used to try to understand your mentor, mentee, ways of thinking, ways of working, and then trying to help them communicate. The graph on the right talks about thinking and planning and doing and directing. And ideally, your balance is somewhere in the middle. You can't be only a thinker. You have to get some things done. You can't be only a doer, because sometimes you have to think through it. And so that balance is something that we can work with our mentees. And finally, barriers to effective mentoring. Just because you're paired up as a mentor doesn't mean it's going to work. And the mentor-mentee failure or ineffectiveness is often just a mismatch. It wasn't the right person for various reasons. There may be goals we talked about. They may not be engaged. It may not be the right communication style. It depends, but maybe something that just doesn't work. There's many symptoms to this mentor-mentee mismatch. You know, the mentor may dread attending meetings. Well, that's not good. You want to look forward to seeing your mentee. You want to be excited and happy, and then that will exude your ability to help mentor them productivity. The mentor does not find the time to meet as agreed upon. Well, if they're trying to avoid meetings, that's not good. If they're too busy, maybe they shouldn't be a mentor. The mentor doesn't respond to written documents, grants, emails in a timely manner. They need to be engaged. They need to support their mentee. And if you're waiting weeks and weeks and weeks for a response, that is not going to be healthy. The mentee doesn't feel a sense of belonging within the professional culture. The mentee needs to fit in there. So if they don't feel they belong, that success is not going to be there. A sense of shared curiosity and teamwork is not present. Again, you have to be part of a team. You have to acknowledge that, and if it's not there, it's not going to be successful. The mentor does most of the talking. Well, that's not going to be healthy. Again, it's a collaboration, it's a communication, it is a sharing of information. The mentor avoids the mentee or avoids contact. Again, that's a question that may be a mismatch. Maybe the mentor is not the right person. Maybe the mentor shouldn't be a mentor. Just because somebody is successful in getting grants and successful in research doesn't mean they can be an effective mentor. And this is an important one. In the academic world, if you're mentoring somebody, you're supposed to try to get them to a point where you're collaborating, you're doing research together, you're doing publications together. But at some point, you want your mentee to fly on their own. You've got to toss them out of the nest and let them be their individual. And there are mentors that don't want to do that. They want to use the mentee to get more publications. Well, in the academic world, if the mentee is not developing independence at a certain level, they will not advance up the academic ladder. And so the mentor has to recognize their success is based on the mentee's success, not in the idea that they use the mentee to get publications and hold them back. Other signs that or symptoms that the alignment is there. The mentee doesn't like to go to the meetings. They don't follow through on deadlines. Well, that's a problem. They don't feel the sense of belonging within the professional culture. This is where we lose faculty. This is where people leave and move on to other careers. We don't want that. A shared curiosity and teamwork is not present. You want that bonding. You want to be part of the culture of the team. And if it's not there, the relationship will not succeed. Again, if the mentor is doing most of the talking, the mentee is just listening or not even listening at all. And again, we've talked about avoidance. If the mentee is avoiding the mentor, if they're avoiding contact, they're not participating together, it will not be a successful relationship. So my final couple slides are going to be top, why be a mentor. Peter Rosen, I'd like to think everybody knows who he is, and maybe you all do, but he was the father of emergency medicine here in the U.S. He wrote dozens and dozens of books. The EKG book by Rosen, the radiology book for emergency medicine for Rosen. Rosen's Emergency Medicine, that is out there, and it's multiple editions, and it's the 9th edition now, I think. Pediatric Emergency Medicine, the 5-minute emergency medicine consults, and he was the founding editor for the Journal of Emergency Medicine. He was a pioneer in emergency medicine. And he was also one of my first mentors when I was a medical student. And, he in my mind, he was the man. I didn't know it at the time, but he was the guy who did emergency medicine. He was somebody, a role model. He had been fairly long in his career. And here he takes a medical student under his wing, and he starts mentoring me on a research project for my graduation. And he met with me. And what I appreciated about him most is that when I was meeting with him, he wasn't trying to multitask. He wasn't trying to do emails and talk to me. He was focused on me. And actually, he was the one who took me out to play tennis. We played tennis, and then we'd stop and talk about things afterwards. It wasn't always all business. It was about that work-life balance. It was about creating relationships. And he did that with me, but he did that with everybody he mentored. And he mentored lots of people. So Peter was my role model. He was somebody I aspired to be like because he genuinely enjoyed his career. He would tell stories. He would tell quips. I called them Rosenisms. Big surgeon, big incision. Little surgeon, little incision. Bad surgeon, indecision. I think the worst emergency physician is one that can't make a decision. It may not be the right decision. You might have to change it, but you can't stand there and dither. He was all full of many little stories like that. But I think that, in part of mentoring, you're giving a piece of yourself to the person you're mentoring. You try to let them know that you are human, that you've gone a career and you're developing that. And Peter was that. He was that way with everybody. And in fact, my original plan was never to be in academics. It was never to publish papers. I thought that was going to be a lot of work, and it is. But he made it fun. He made it enjoyable. He let me realize that now in the stage of my career that I'm at, I get more joy out of watching one of my students or my fellows or my residents get a publication, get their first paper. Like he helped me get my first paper and inspired that. And since then, I've mentored hundreds of undergraduates and med students and PhD students and master students and all throughout, fellows and faculty. And I've really enjoyed that concept. And I think that the idea of helping people attain their goals, their next step. The next step for an undergraduate may be to get into medical school. For the medical student, maybe to get into a good residency program. For a fellow, it might be to get into a program so they can be a more successful academic professor. And one of my favorite stories, and I'm not saying this just because she invited me here, but Dr. Dunya Al-Faraj, our head of the scientific committee, was one of my mentors, or was one of my fellows and mentees. And she gave me a trophy at the end of our relationship that still sits at my desk. This was a very special thing for me. And it reminds me of what I do. I love reflecting back on the successes of people I work with. And that is what brings me more joy in my career now as it does over time. So I hope that you all go forward with a ability to either find a good mentor now, find one that works with you now. And if you're in a position to be a mentor, to take that on, to really embrace it, to give the time to the people you're working with, they will remember it and they will appreciate it. With that, I thank you, and I guess take some questions if there are some.
Thank you, Prof. Velk, for this very exciting and incredible lecture. Actually, trophy was more than what you deserve if I will compare it with what you give during mentorship. My fellowship program, it was nothing. And thank you for your very great speech. Please, you can type now your questions in the Q&A box. Then I will direct the questions to Prof. Velk.
When you don't get any questions, it's either you spoke so well, everybody understood everything, or it was so confusing, nobody knows how to ask a question. So
there is actually one question for you.
Right.
From your experience, if there was a misalignment between mentor and mentee, what is the best solution?
Well, hopefully that's a great question because it's not always recognized. And I think the first part is really recognizing that there is a malalignment. And that could be from the mentor side, that could be from the mentee side, and sometimes only one may be recognizing it. I've seen cases where mentors are not supporting the growth and development of their mentees. And sometimes that's recognized by somebody outside of that. But hopefully somebody figures out. The mentee may be saying, I'm not getting what I need from my mentor. He's not responding. He's not filling my emails. He's just, whatever it is. And they can talk to somebody else. And then they realize, well, maybe that mentor is not meant to be the mentor for this person. I've had opportunities where I've spoken with other mentors and saying, I spoke with one of your mentees and, sounds like you're real busy and having difficulty getting, responses. And they're trying to get timelines and they're getting anxious. It's making them a little more anxious. Do you think you have time for that? Do you think you need to engage another mentor? So it depends on the individual malalignment, but hopefully it's picked up by either the mentor or the mentee. The mentor may be finding out the mentee's not meeting timelines, not wanting to meet, not participating, and it may be that the relationship's not there. So again, when you start seeing those symptoms we talked about, hopefully one side or the other recognizes it, and then you may need to get a third party involved. It may be a research director at your facility. It may be the chair. It may be another colleague. But at some point, somebody's going to have to address it and either make some adjustments or consider you don't have to break off the mentor relationship. They can still be a mentor, but they may not be your focus mentor. They could be an advisor and have somebody else focus on. So I hope that answers that. Oops, I think you're muted. You are muted.
I'm sorry. Yes, there is a couple of questions. If you have time to answer them, how to know when to end mentor relationship?
Interesting. I think the only time you end a mentor relationship if it's unproductive, toxic, if it's just unhealthy. I have lots of mentors that were strong mentors during my career that one of them was one of my researchers and he retired, and yet I will still reach out to him once in a while. So it never ends, I think, unless again, there's something unhealthy about the relationship and that just sort of fades away. I guess sort of like a bad relationship over time. The high school or college boyfriend, girlfriend doesn't work away, disappears over time. It can fade, but I like to have mentors. I think everybody brings something to the table, even though I may not be as focused on them. They just may have a less active role in my life. But sometimes down the road, you may need that relation. You may need that question. You may have that opportunity. So unless it's toxic or unhealthy, I think that mentors should always sort of be in the background and utilized as necessary.
Thank you, Prof. Gary. Actually, there is one comment. It wasn't a question that said that just from Zahra Gharib. Just she want to thank you for this outstanding talk, and it was so inspiring and clear for her.
Oh, thank you very much.
Really, I would like to thank you again for your outstanding, incredible, and amazing lecture. It was amazing, as you are amazing mentor. And so we can move now to the next session after 5-minute break. And thank you, Prof. Velk, again. It was a great honor to be with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to say it from a mentor to see the success that you've developed. This is why you take the time to be a mentor. It is very heartwarming. So thank you so much.
Thank you.